Yeah, let me pretend that people are listening, and I'll give some generic intro, and then
All right.
we'll start talking. Yeah, on three, two, one. Hey, everybody! Chad's joining me for a great conversation today. We're just talking about visual ways to make our experience dynamic. And I figured I'm having a great conversation with a friend, but I wanted you to enjoy it as well, and kind of pull back the curtain about two visual communicators talking about how to visually communicate. So, Chad, maybe
Okay.
why don't you just give a quick intro to who you are, and then we could just start brainstorming.
Sure. So my name is Chad Hovind. I'm the senior pastor at Horizon Community Church. Been here about 18 years. I've been an administrator at Moody Bible Institute, so we got that in common. I was a video production major as well as pastoral major at Moody. So I've been a creative arts director for 3 Willow Creek style churches. Most have been church plants, 2 down in Atlanta, Buckhead Community Church, which turned into Cumberland Community Church, and then New Community Church down LaGrange, Georgia. And so then I moved up here to Cincinnati. And so I'm the lead teacher. I do about 60 to 80 original messages a year on the communication side. And then I also lead the creative teams in the creative processes weekly. We have a unique 2-service design. So we have 4 services every weekend, but 2 of them are 100% different from the other 2.
Got it. Hey,
Quick
what
snapshot.
is this? That's great. I'm exhausted just listening. That's a lot. That's on your plate. But that's awesome that you're a gifted communicator. And so if anybody can, it's you, pull off those things and to communicate different content to different audiences each weekend. We started this conversation about a week ago in terms of, hey, what are you doing visually dynamic to engage people online? What have you seen? What are you experimenting with? So maybe before we get to the experimenting and like the future possibilities, why don't you just maybe explain some of the things that you're doing right now that's changed since COVID?
Yeah, well, let me share my screen real quick with you because I think that'll show you some actual images of what we're doing that I think will take it from just me talking about it to otherwise. So let me click share here, switch over to this one. All right, so here's an example. So right now, for example, we're doing a series at our first service. We've been going book verse by verse through 1 Samuel. So we got that series going on, so we're using that. At our exploring service, we're doing a series called Metamorphosis, How to Become the Best Version of You, which we're using a whole butterfly metaphor and the idea of what does it mean to be renewed or transformed. And so some things we're doing is we're having to do like 5 different PowerPoints for every weekend. Because, for example, on the video, we need a minimum size 90 font, as you can see on the screen here. It's like 90 to 100. But then we put it for the weekend, and we have to use, we're finding black backgrounds work better with white or blue text or yellow text. But then when we go to the Sunday morning edition, we actually are using backgrounds because they're more colorful. We got to reduce it down to like a 60 font because otherwise it just looks so massive and giant on stage. So we're having to build 2 different formats for that. A couple other things here just to show you some visuals. So like visually, here's some of the shots that we're using on a given Sunday. So I'm actually shooting the services on Thursdays. And while I'm there on Thursdays, we're shooting it in components. So as you'll see in a moment, I think about my 30-minute message as like 14 3 to 6 minute components. And then I've got 3 different locations. They are all on stage. One, as you see in front of me, is that chair. So I sit in the chair and I've got 2 cameras at me. So I'm doing typical, talk right here directly to the camera, switch, talk to this camera, and they're cutting in between. And that's an intimate, conversational, pastoral heart. I can still do cover-ups of PowerPoint or visuals or videos, but that's kind of location 1 of the camera angles. Location 2 you'll see in this PowerPoint, and that is I'm standing next to a TV. And we found that we had to increase the TV size to 65 inch. We found the 45 didn't work, the 55 didn't work. That 65 is allowing me to use that 90 font, and I can touch it, look at it, visualize it, and then I've got a spot on the floor. It's got an X on it. I've got to keep my right foot under. So that's to keep that thing framed up correctly. However, as you'll see directly underneath that, there's 2 cameras at each location. So I can talk to the screen, then I can turn 15, 20 degrees to my right, and you'll see this image right here. That's me explaining to the text, or at least it looks a little different. So I've got 2 camera angles in that location. And I'm pretty much switching every, 90 seconds, 120 seconds between the 2 cameras. Actually just keep some visual variety. And then the 3rd camera angle, we got a couple options. So one is we'll set up a table and a chair. So I'll walk over to that location. Sometimes I have a Bible there, so I can just read directly from the Bible. Sometimes I'll have object lessons there. I'm a magician, a juggler, so I might have some magic tricks there. I might be just pulling up like a Jewish shawl. I talked about how David cut off the the tassels from Saul's Shaw the other day. Or we're using a vertical TV there. So we have another 65-inch television turned vertically. So you can see that at the bottom of the page. So that just creates another interesting look. So I walk over to that. In this case, I'm explaining the cave that David is in. And it just created an interesting new way to do it. But it's also another PowerPoint we have to create. So it's a whole nother PowerPoint presentation. It's run vertical. But it really looks cool. Like when we're showing how our app works, it looks like I've got a giant iPhone sitting next to me. And so I can actually click through it. So that's been really interesting. And as you can see on the top view, I can then talk with the TV to my left and then turn directly to the camera. And you can see the TV still sitting there, but that allows for another look. So within a 30-minute message, I've got 2 cameras, 3 locations, and then create some diversity.
Yeah, we did that vertical screen, and we faked it that it was a touch screen. So we would just have our trigger person firing pro presenter every time the communicator talked and touched the screen, and that worked for one weekend. And then the next weekend, the person was snoozing, and they were tapping on the screen, and it ruined the illustration. So we no longer try to pretend that. It's just it's too much of a gamble, and then everyone snickers and everyone's laughing at you for a minute before you have to regather their attention. So it's a bold move if churches want to do it.
Sure.
That's great. So what I hear you saying is you are changing the communication style almost like every 5 minutes. Like, I'm here, now follow me, now I'm here. And just to keep people's attention engaged. Have you found, let's get into response. Have you found your people responding to that? Is it spastic? Is it too much for them? Or like, no, I'm actually engaged with you. You're keeping me in this journey. How's the response been?
The response has been great. In fact, we have had consistent growth. We just installed our video system last December. So we've had to really move everybody over to video in a way that was not their habit beforehand. So we're getting about 1,000 views per weekend. So we don't know if that represents, family of 2, a family of 1, or family of 4 or 5, but we're having about 1,000 views a weekend on both those services. We're recording both services, exploring and equipping both weekends. And we've had a great response to it. In fact, I had an intern, who worked with me when he was in like 7th grade. He's now a Broadway Shakespearean actor in New York. So he's come in and he's been coaching me. I'm probably 20 hours into the coaching of how to teach the video. What are the skills that work on stage that don't work on video, and vice versa? So that's been really helpful. Every weekend I'm watching it. We're working on shot composition, this every 5-minute rotation, or sometimes even more than that. And it really leans into video production. So like in my next PowerPoint, I'll show you a last thing. We do some cover-ups, graphic cover-up, or a video or image full screen. We were doing some stuff like in the corner, like you might do in a newscast, but you got to think about that stuff in advance. But we actually find the full cover-up just works better, just because of some people might be watching it on their phones. Yep. And our stats show we got a lot of people watching on phones. They may be mirroring it to their home television, but we're finding that actually bigger the better. Yeah. And then we're shooting the bands a totally separate day. So I didn't give a lot of examples there, except we basically clear that TV set off, and then we're just using our full stage as usual with a 8-camera shoot. Last thing, and then we can maybe dive in. So here's how I do message prep. I actually have 16 Post-it notes, and I assign to those where I'm going to be, what I'm going to say, and how long it's going to be. And that allows me to know I'm going to shoot for 6 minutes. And then we'll reset. I can really think about what's the emotion I'm going for, what's the content, I'm talking over stuff. So here's an example of what it would look like as a storyboard from last week. I'm sitting in the chair. Life is like mountain climbing. I'm going to talk about an ibex. What's David doing in En-Gedi? A little background there. Then they're going to throw a video on top of me of En-Gedi, showing the waterfalls, showing the mountain climbing while I'm still talking about En-Gedi and visiting there in 2012. I'll come to the main point. God won't tame the jagged rocks when he's making us into wild goats. So I would be sitting in that chair during that 6 minutes, talking to one camera, maybe after a minute, turn and look at another camera, then talking, but I'm covered up with the video or the graphic, back to me, talking a little bit, let me tell you the main point, graphic comes on. So all that would happen in about 6 minutes. This is what, visually it might look like in my paper, although I'll show you in a second. Then I'm going to move over, as you see here, to the TV. I'm going to unpack 1 Samuel 28, 1-7, 5 minutes there, explain the prophet Gad said, don't go out of Judah, explained Achish the king was not a good guy, he was the king of the Philistines. Then I'm going to move, and that whole thing took 5 minutes. Then I'm going to move over to the vertical TV and tell a story about caving, kind of fun of caving as a kid, and what it meant to feel like David being in the cave. what that actually looks like as far as what I preach out of is I've got a method. I took the Decker grid system and kind of have added to it over the last 25 years. So this is what I preach off of every week. I've got one set of Post-it notes that's 1, 2, 3, so 4 times 5, so 20 Post-it notes is what I speak off of. This is what I use. I memorize probably 90% of what I do, but every weekend I'm speaking off of this thing. So it's been so helpful to transfer from already thinking in modulated moments to now I can rip 3 of those off, stick it in my Bible. So I'm opening the Bible and it looks like I'm just reading the Bible, but I've actually got my 3 modules sitting in there for 5 minutes. Then I might walk over to the TV and I might have a dry erase board with just those 3 keywords like you see here. So that's kind of the method I've used historically, but typically I'm moving on stage from location to location. Now my feet don't move. I mean, except for that one place with a vertical TV, I got to stand still if they want to have that intimate shot. So I've had to find ways to use movement and in much different ways than I'm used to, because I'm typically, my camera operators are all over the place. I'm very intentional in creating staging and imaginary objects and anchoring it when I'm speaking on stage.
Do you, just from a performance and execution standpoint, do you direct the cameras or do the cameras direct you? In other words, if people are listening and they're not aware of what we're talking about, are you going and you're looking at a camera and when you see the tally light change, you look at the camera, or are you looking at a camera and then you're like, I'm now moving and I'm going to look at this camera and I'm anticipating they're going to follow me? Who's directing who? You, the cameras, the cameras, you?
We've tried it all 3 ways. And so one of the issues is with COVID, we haven't been able to be fully staffed. And so part of our challenge has been because of people feeling dangerous or because of our policies, we have got only one of the 3 manned cameras are manned. So that's why we got lockable cameras. Now we have a few more now, so now we're probably half manned. But in that we had to experiment with some things. And so originally I was waiting for the red light to switch. So I know when I'm sitting in the chair, there's only 2 choices. Robot camera here, man camera here. The man cameras all have red lights. If the red light's not on, I'm supposed to be on the other one. But actually those robotic cameras that are on the wall don't have lights. So it's a little tricky because there isn't a clear light.
Yep.
But even then, what I found is I start having a lot of eye dart because I'm anticipating. And so we started watching the camera work and it actually was distracting to the audience because you see me either looking, okay, I guess it's time. So instead, we decided to let me lead, but that does take another level of thinking when you're speaking.
Oh, yeah.
That I'm not sure. I think it depends on who you want to do it. So I will then turn over. But when I first started doing that, I had a tendency either to turn too little. Oh my goodness, we're on the same camera angle for 5 minutes, or too fast.
Yep.
So it definitely took me a couple months to really get into the rhythm of telling a full paragraph. It feels like more like 90 seconds at minimum before I move. And that's actually worked really well. Although part of the coaching I got last month is, Chad, when you switch over, in my mind as a video editor, I know the light hasn't come on yet. It should. So I'm trying to help the director out. And so I may be looking back until he's ready.
Yep.
So we changed that about a month ago to say, Chad, your job is to look at the camera. Our job is to cut to you. If it takes an extra second because we're trying to frame that robot camera up, or half a second, you do your job. So that actually started doing that 3 weeks ago. So I've been leading the shot to shot for probably 3 months, and it's worked really effectively. And now I'm trying not to second guess my team because otherwise my eyes are looking back and forth and it ends up communicating nervousness, even though I'm not nervous. I'm actually just trying to help the team out.
That's good. I'm going to get you to stop sharing your screen. So I'm going to take over for a second and show a couple things. That's super helpful to see what you're doing right now. Want to know in a minute what you're doing down the road, or what you're playing with options. The one thing I'll respond to as churches are talking about, as Chad was talking about cover shops, he's basically saying he's talking about something, and then the whole screen gets filled up with whatever that visual is. The other option out there, as he referenced, is again, I'm trying to make sure the cookies are on the bottom shelf here. Is we'll use it. It's the picture-in-picture style. It's like the news anchor style. So what we do is you put in the top right-hand corner. So we've been doing that because we felt, and here's the deal: neither option is there's no silver bullet out there. Either option works. It is kind of what you feel works best for your audience. For us, we've always wanted to have eye contact with a camera, whoever's presenting. So if it's me and I'm talking, and I'm now talking about the community outreach we're doing, great. I still want eye contact with me. So we make the me go small. I'm trying to frame it up right here. Picture in picture. And then the big picture is those community engagement photos that were there. I think you nailed it.
Yeah.
We're showing. And then we'll go back to me, because the last thing we found that once I start talking and I'm saying, hey, isn't community engagement great? And I cover up my eyes, I've just lost eye contact and emotional connection with the communicator. So we've done that, even though they get small. And it isn't perfect on all platforms, especially in a mobile device. That communicator's got smaller and smaller because it's a small screen to start with.
I would agree with you. If you're going to trump, you're right. Emotional connection's got to trump everything. So if I had a choice between it, so even when I do get covered up, it's very short periods of time for that very reason, because it's about that personal connection.
It's also, that's helpful. It's also made us really critical of the images we'll choose. So in service, we'll throw an image on screen while the communicator is presenting, and it could be a B-level image. Yeah, maybe it adds value, maybe it doesn't. Well, now that landscape is vital, because that's the only connection you have to the person. It's not just the iMag. Before you had live and iMag. Now it's just your image magnification. It's just the screen. So we only choose images that enhance the narrative. We don't throw any fluff out there visually anymore because of that.
All killer, no filler.
Hopefully that's the goal. It should have been the goal before. If not, it's definitely the goal now. I'm going to show some of the things that we're toying around with, or things I've seen out there that are cool. And then I want to see you as well, what you're doing. So this is something I've seen from Grace Church, from a friend of mine, Brian, up there in Boston. And what they did was they actually put on their stage, they put another set. So like, they don't have a studio space. They're just, our cameras are already in the room, but we don't want it to feel like they're at church. We want it to feel like we're in their home. So we're going to make a home living room set, and they've designed that. And obviously it's modular based, so they can take it out and put something. There's just three walls. It's very easy to design, and they're already utilizing their space. So some churches are like, we don't have a studio. Like they don't have a studio either. It's just a unique way to utilize that. And then this, about that? Yeah.
Yeah, so I noticed when you sent me that picture that there's several different textures back there, which one is visually interesting, right? You got the curtain, you got the shelving system, and you got the brick. Is that so that the individual shots are in, like, for instance, that woman on stage left or right? I would imagine if you did a close-up shot of her, it's all brick behind her.
Yep.
And if you did a shot of the guitar player, it would be, all of the shelves and the pictures behind her. So is that why those textures were chosen, so the individual close-up shots can look interesting, or is that just let's be interesting? What do you think was the thinking behind that?
I would, my theory is, well, first of all, it's the same color palette, right? We're working with tans, grays, and whites. So even if you change from this background on the one side to here, it still feels cohesive. It still feels like I'm in the same room. And then I think change it up. Like, do I want to see photo backgrounds behind all people? Wow, this family really loves photos. That might feel a little much. Would be my theory. And then the other quick example. This is I found this, and I stole this from LCBC up in PA, where you can't see the whole shot here. But what it is, it's their lead communicator during the message, and he's communicating to prompter right off camera here. The thing I found phenomenal is, you see what I highlighted in the bottom, is he has tape lines. Normally we keep our communicators within a 10-foot box on stage and tell them you can move 2 feet to this side and 2 feet to that side, and that's all you got. They've locked him down. And he is looking at prompter, and he's communicating to prompter. So this is a shot from me and their audience. I am, as a guest, sitting there, and I'm basically acting as a studio audience, because he's standing on stage perpendicular to people, and he's communicating to a teleprompter, which I'm now looking on iMac. So they treat currently, I don't know if they've changed it up, but they treat their Saturday night service as a broadcast campus. And they're recording that, which then gets, I believe, online, and then at the campuses the following day. So on the campuses, when you're watching the broadcast experience, you're seeing somebody talk to camera, not talking to a room, which makes the experience a lot more. So the pro is, it makes the experience a lot more intimate, because I'm looking at the camera and the receiver's receiving eye contact. The con is, that's your first service at the gate. From a communicator standpoint, usually if you're doing like 3 services in a row, the first one will be maybe 70%, and the next one will be like 100%, and then the last one's back down to 90%. So it's usually that middle one where we hit our stride as communicator.
Sure.
So taking the first one out of the gate is usually the weakest, but it's the weakest from a performance standpoint, but it's the strongest from a production, because again, the audience is receiving eye contact. So that's what we're exploring and playing around with as we reopen, treating that Saturday night as our studio recording that goes everywhere. What are you guys thinking about as you're trying to innovate down the road?
Yeah, so we've moved a little bit, but right now I was shooting all my services on Tuesdays in this intimate, I'm the only one in the audience, I'm talking directly to the camera. Now the downside to that is you don't have any audience response, so you're having to anticipate audience reaction. Hopefully people are laughing at your jokes or responding. So that's the downside is, I'm talking in a room with 3 cameras and I don't have that audience energy. So the ownership's really on the speaker to produce that and to anticipate that. So we shoot me on what was Tuesdays, we moved that to Thursday. So Thursday mornings, I'm shooting from 9 to 12, equipping message first, exploring message second. So I'm doing 2 messages directly to the camera in the format I described on Thursdays. The band, though, we used to have a separate rehearsal night for our equipping band on Tuesday nights for Saturday, and for exploring band was Wednesdays for Sunday. We've now crushed those 2 bands into one for both logistics and for shooting and for cost-effective reasons. So they come in on Tuesday afternoons now, and so they are recording the music for the online service. There's nobody in the room, so we can rehearse things and rechange it up. But we're recording the music on Tuesday afternoons and the messages on Thursday, and video teams put all that together by Friday. What makes it unique then is then we all come back on the weekend and we deliver that live. So I think that's another interesting twist, which is when I'm recording on Thursday, I got to go, hey, what's the song I'm coming out of? Okay, that song, How Great Thou Art, was so awesome. So, but because 1,000 households are watching that service, that we feel like we got to put our best foot forward to 1,000 people, then it's a different best foot forward on the weekend. So now, instead of running Saturdays and Sundays, we're right now just running 2 on Sunday. We'll eventually be back up to 4. But in that case, then that same band's coming, performing the equipping service at 9:15. And now I've got another unique piece, because we don't do multi-site, but it's almost like multi-site because we're reduced capacity by 25%. We've built a tent out back that holds twice the capacity. So for the first time, I'm now got back to my stage element skills. I'm talking directly to the audience and interacting, but now I've got 3 cameras in the room that when the light goes on, I'm talking directly to them. Hey, you guys out in the terrace, great to have you here. You know what I'm talking about. And I'm kind of making jokes about the people in the terrace kind of get it, and the people in the chapel don't, or whatever. And we'll have people clapping out there. I can't hear any of it, but the experience out in the chapel. So now I'm almost using a multi-site approach. And then our 10:45 service gets a little more complicated because we don't have kids ministry yet. So I'm actually taking the message I delivered on Thursday, I'm gutting 10 minutes out of it, and I'm reworking it with our children's pastor. I'm co-teaching it almost like you'd have in a children's program, still adult content, but she and I are co-teaching it together. We'll tell a story together. So instead of like last week I told the story of the squirrel, the eagle, and the duck going to school, and how they each had skills, and how God wants to train us according to our bent. So instead of just telling that like I did on Thursday, now it's Sierra Strong and I are up there. Hey, Sierra, remember that story about the parable? Oh yeah, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I might, cut out an illustration, put in a magic trick or a science experiment. She's drawing behind me, so all my main points she's drawing. So the kids are drawing along each main point. So I'm making my 3 application points very visual. And so I'll just walk over. Hey, what are you drawing for us here? That's right. What does it mean to, whatever the point was 2 weeks ago? She's drawn it out. It was a coal metaphor from Malachi. Being a piece of coal is a prerequisite to being a diamond. So she's drawing a coal. Hey, if you're a kid with us today, you got a piece of paper, you can draw along with us. So it's real small things that don't necessarily dumb the content down, but show the kids that we care about you and we're keeping you engaged. Last week we tried something different, which is we're doing that proverb about training your child according to the ark. So we had a Frogger game up on a dry erase board, and so the frogs were each different shapes because the series is called Shapes. We got a octagon frog, a triangle frog, and a circle frog, and each had an arc across the Frogger game to a lily pad that was an octagon, a square, and a circle. And I had like 20 key words written on the dry erase board that I was going to use in the sermon. So anytime you heard me use the key words, anger, Shaggy, Hanukkah, kids could raise their hand. So it's constant interruptions, which some people may not, be able to do that. But again, I've been a magician my whole life. I've been interrupted. So as I was speaking, kids would raise their hand. She'd say, "Oh, we got one of the words," and certain words made the octagon frog move, certain ones. So that was kind of a fun gimmick to keep the kids involved. And I could even lean the content more 95% toward the adult, but there was something going on with the kids. So those are some of the things we're experimenting with.
Yeah. One of the things that we found, just to touch on what you said there, is we were trying to do, we were recording in modular, but we were trying to make it a cohesive experience. So we'd finish the worship set, and then we would tell the hosts who were recording multiple days, hey, it's ending on this song, leverage some of the lyrics coming out of that. But that still, as much as we could coach talent, it still felt a little artificial. Wasn't
Yep.
that worship great? Isn't God on the throne? Isn't insert lyric here from the song? It still felt like, because it wasn't in the moment. And so we're moving towards leaning into the module and just owning it. And the other thing that we found for ourselves is we used to have staff meetings in person. And then when we went online, we've been doing that virtually. And the gentleman who's been producing it did a great job. He's kind of made like a YouTube style. A lot of cultural references, a lot of jump cuts, a lot of humor, a lot of breaking the fourth wall. Think Deadpool, but not rated R.
Yeah.
And so our staff has been highly engaged with it. And we're like, man, that's hilarious. And then someone on our staff said, well, why don't we do that for our hosting on the weekend? And it was a little light bulb moment that went on. And like, hey, like we, and with staff, we push the envelope, and we're probably a little, we're pretty cheeky with that. And it's a lot of insider baseball and jokes that only staff will get. But that style, we hope, will be applicable. So like that is the truest style. That's the most engaging style out there right now, that people are used to. Through like one of the biggest video platforms out there on YouTube. Well, why don't we leverage some of that in how we communicate? Because in the past, we are basically doing a lot of churches, I think the majority of churches are doing news anchor, right? It's an old paradigm. How do you present people? You get them standing there in a stiff manner, and they're telling the facts, and it's not humorous, it's not lively, it's not authentic. So we're leveraging that, and I'll say this: we're trying it out. If it's successful, at the end of this conversation, I'll put it on the back end.
Okay.
I'll just cut it out. We won't show it. But we are gambling on trying new things and being innovative. We're 22 weeks in now to being exclusively online, saying what can we change up, to not just to change up for novelty's sake, but to make better, to engage more people, help them follow Jesus is our goal. So that's what we're trying, moving down the road. I know I'm gonna respect your time, so I'm gonna wrap up our time here. Before I do, any last thing that you're gonna swing on and you're gonna try maybe next month or down the road that, man, I would love to try this and innovate as a visual communicator?
Well, I think one of the things, back to your stage set you sent me, is one of the challenges I have, because we're shooting the full stage like it's the band, in one format, and then me as if I'm in a TV studio. Those things are in conflict with each other in that they're requiring totally different setups. So we're trying to figure out is, without having a separate room that doesn't have lights, doesn't have the camera set up, is there a way to design a set so that when you see it, back to those images you saw of me, in one sense it's me on the chair, but you can still see we're sitting on the stage, and there's the backlight or the truss there. So one idea would get like a drama set, almost like they did there, but think of it like a scrim. So you got a scrim that goes right behind me. So the two camera shots that hit me in that angle, I can now, make it look like a bookshelf or whatever it is you want behind me, and it's maybe 10 foot by 12 foot. The problem is I either need to remove that, because now the band's still required to do 6 foot social distancing. So I can't do some of the things by shoving people together I might do in a typical setup. So I got to keep them spread out. The stage isn't even long enough, so we've had to move the drum cage to where the side stage is. So my problem is, from a staging standpoint, I could either just gut the whole stage and say, like you guys did, or that one picture you showed me, how do I do that? But it still feels like I'm looking at a stage. So I'm really trying to figure out, how does the message portion feel like I'm really in a living room while still having access to the TV studio lights, the TV studio cameras that are in place without having to do a field shot. So I think that's the thing I'm trying to figure out, which is, what's a level of setup we can quickly set up a backdrop in all 3 locations that looks good and just takes that kind of outside clutter back here and makes it a little sharper. But it's got to be removable, and of course there's not a lot of place in the church to hold a 10 foot by 12 foot multiple pieces of that. So any thoughts on that? That's probably the next biggest thing we're trying to figure out.
That's great. Let's wrap up our time here. Chad, if people want to get in touch with you, see what you're doing on a weekly basis, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can go to horizoncc.com. That's our website. Or you can download our app, which is Horizon Space CC. And you can download the app and you have access to all of our messages and all that. So that'd probably be the best way, but thanks.
Awesome. Again, Chad, thanks for joining us. You are an all-star communicator, always looking to push the envelope and visually engaging people. Appreciate that. If you're watching this and you have ideas of how to make the experience better, we are here to share and to learn from you. So jump into the comments, tell you how you are experimenting with visually communicating while you're exclusively online. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, amen and amen. It is good to know that in a world that's constantly changing, that we have a God that never changes, and He's still on the throne, reigning forever. Well, welcome to Christ Fellowship. My name is Damien. I'm one of the pastors here. If it is your first time with us today, we want to welcome you and ask you if you would fill out a connection card for us by texting the word CF Miami, one word, CF Miami, to 313131. And because this past week, for many of us, it was probably our first time as homeschool tutors, that would be 31 to the third power. You're welcome. Well, if you've been with us, we're continuing our new series, Marriage on the Rocks. And we want you to submit your questions. And I mean all your questions. Questions about your relationships, expectations, roles. Questions like, why is my husband still playing video games?
Woo! Whoa! Yeah, baby!
Or, when is my wife gonna stop sending me to Publix to buy embarrassing things? Questions like, when is my 40-year-old son gonna move out the house? You know what? Maybe that one's on you. Whatever those questions are, we want you to submit those questions to cfmiami.org/questions. Well, this week we kick off phase 1 of our plans to regather. So I want to give a shout out to all of our CF home gatherings, especially those in Homestead. Well, CF home gatherings are a way for us to expand our options to meet in person, worship together, and gain resources that'll help us follow Jesus. Well, Christ Fellowship is one church with many locations, and we believe one of those locations could be right where you are. If you want more information on CF home gatherings or want to start one, in fact, all of you should start one, visit cfmiami.org/home. We believe that home gatherings are going to change the way we help people follow Jesus. Well, Pastor Omar has a great word of encouragement for us, so let's kick it over to him.